Moonlit Soul of the Hollow Realms series was written by Jordan Allen, copyright 2023, cover illustration by Lucyan Carreira. Prologue. Reverend Toulon prayed in front of the statue of the angel. He prayed to the True One that the demons would not make it through the gates. He and the other priests had blessed every inch of the temple, but if the onslaught continued, then it would only delay the inevitable. "They're breaking through the barricades at the bridge, Father," said Pierre the acolyte as he rushed into the hall. His voice trembled with fear when he spoke. "It was only a matter of time," lamented Reverend Toulon with a heavy sigh and rising to his feet. "Our last line of defense is the walls. Those won't last long with how many of them there are. Should I send word to the women and children that they are to make their way down the mountain? It is a treacherous route, Father, but we're left with no other choice. For them to stay here would be certain death, for they cannot hope to fight." Reverend Toulon nodded solemnly. "We are too few and too weak to defeat the entire horde, but we can buy them some time. Let us do what we can for them while we are still able, even if the cost is our very lives." Pierre clasped his hands together and dropped to his knees. I fear, Father," admitted the acolyte, his voice weak and raspy. "I do not like to admit it, but it must be true." "What do you fear, Pierre?" "I fear that we won't be able to buy them enough time to escape. I fear that those wretched demons will desecrate these hallowed halls. I fear all of it." Reverend Toulon was sympathetic to the young man. His faith in the True One was strong, but he did not have the years and wisdom that Toulon had. "Even if this temple is desecrated, which I have no doubt that it will be, the True One does not die with it. We are one outpost in a hostile world of many faithful. The people who escape will spread the word so that our brothers may be better prepared and fortified against evil. Rest assured that if we act now, we give them the best chance they have. Let us go immediately and linger no longer." The Fear of Moncroix was written by Bryan Asher, copyright 2023, cover illustration by Christian Angel, cover design by Elizabeth Mackey. Prologue. He briskly leaped from tree to tree, careful not to let himself slip from the high resting branches. Falling was not an option, as the murky bogs of this forest were filled with grimy substances not meant for mortals to bathe in. Davion had been practicing his skills as a wayward for decades. Aerial travel was a commonplace feat for someone in his order. His destination, however, was anything but. He'd received a summons of high importance from the long-standing steward of the Waywards, Jareen Mathis. While not retaining a strict bureaucratic structure, the most tenured individual within their ceiling was responsible for disseminating vital information. Tonight's summoning was only used by Jareen for items of grave concern. In all his years serving, Davion had only received one prior to tonight's gathering. His violet eyes squinted through the darkness. Despite only having a faint teal moonlight to assist his vision, his enhanced senses noticed the trees thinning ahead. His pace slowed while reaching the last branch before the clearing. Taking notice of the circular grass field below, he saw several of his colleagues had already arrived. Stepping off the branch, the back of his overcoat flapped furiously as he plummeted towards the ground, some 20 feet below. As his toes touched the grass blades, Davion tucked one shoulder and rolled gracefully into a perfect landing. As he approached the group, another attendee, Celis Weil, turned to greet Davion with a familiar grin. "So, what did I miss, Celis?" Davion asked while brushing his black hair away from his eyes. "Only a bit of chatter. Nothing formal has been mentioned," his friend answered. Davion tilted his head quizzically. "No one here has any inclination why Math has called this meeting? Not even a word from Alucor or Christovel. They're always lingering around central grounds." Celis bit his inner cheek and shook his head. "I'm afraid not. Even the most connected have no idea." Davion glanced at the other members, scanning their faces for signs someone was clued in. All in attendance had crossed arms, hunched shoulders, and furrowed brows. Everyone he saw was guarded and poking around for answers, just like himself. Breathing deeply, he decided to abandon his query until Mathis arrived. "Since we've got time to spare, we might as well share a drink, Dawn of the Black Sun was written by Timo Burnham, copyright 2023, cover art, design, and illustration by Neutron Boar. Prologue. The wind stirred up a cloud of dust and hurled it into the exile's face. He squeezed his eyes shut as the tiny flecks battered his skin, pressing his lips together to prevent more from getting in his mouth. As the gust died down, he did not even try to wipe away the dust. There was no point. More sand and dirt would be sent his way any moment. He pulled his now tattered traveling robe up in front of his face, forming a pitiful barrier as he continued towards his destination. It's just ahead now. He braced as another gust hit him, a few larger sand grains stinging the soft skin of his ear as he pushed the last few steps to the edge of the oasis. It was a shallow depression in the mostly flat and empty expanse of the barren lands. It would not do much to stop the sand from being blown in his face. But that was not what he cared most about. The exile moved towards the deepest part of the bowl, aware now of just how parched his mouth was. The idea of even a few drops of water gracing his tongue drove his exhausted body forward with desperate energy. He passed a shrub, its growth stunted, leaving it only a few branches, reaching out as if begging for nourishment. Begging. How weak and pitiful. The exile would have spat if his mouth had contained any moisture. A few more steps and he finally reached the very center of the oasis. It was low enough here that the top of the bowl cast a merciful shadow over his body. He relaxed and fell to his knees, reaching his hand down, expecting to feel soothing wetness. Instead, all he felt was more coarse sand. No. He began digging, using what strength he had left to claw away sand. After a few scoops, he reached the layer of dirt underneath, but it was just as dry. He dug feebly at the hard crust. It might as well have been stone for all the progress he made. The exile fell back, breathing hard from the exertion. Legends of Atlameria, Harbinger of World's End was written by J.R. Cason, copyright 2021. Cover art produced by J.R. Cason. Chapter 1. The Eyes of the Forest. At last she found his silhouette amongst a stand of tall, slender aspens, dwarfed only by the mountains beyond. A slight breeze carried the unmistakable scent of burning peat and incense on the air, and she wondered why he'd stopped at this location with nowhere else to run. In the days before, he detected her presence despite her caution, leading to the chase which brought her here. With this knowledge, the huntress knew she had to maintain her concealment, for the mission and her target were far from ordinary. This day, the stakes were higher than they'd ever been, and failure meant certain death. Dark chestnut hair fell to the middle of her back, bound loosely in a knot to avoid catching on the dense vegetation of the forested southern lands. Rain from the day before soaked the leaves that littered the ground, providing an additional benefit to her step as she crept over closer to her target. The air felt much cooler than usual for a late spring evening, suggesting a rather mild summer approaching. Such thoughts the huntress quickly dismissed, keeping her eyes firmly fixed upon the dark silhouette. Medium of stature with a lean frame suggesting the agility of a feline, she approached the hooded figure with but the slightest of sound. Her pale skin typically shone with the radiance of morning dew against the morning sun, but today she wore a palette of earth tones, supplied by the forest floor itself in her desire to blend in with the natural surroundings. Camouflaged beneath the visage of the forest, her beauty arose from beneath the leather vestments unimpeded. The ability to be unseen and strike from the shadows meant those unfortunate enough to find themselves on her docket rarely glimpsed their pursuer and lived to tell of it. With grace and cunning, she maneuvered through the trees like a panther stalking her mark. There she homed in on the dark hooded figure. Infinite Money Glitch was written by James Krake, copyright 2022. Chapter 1. The door to High Tackle's odds and ends flew open, clattering the bell. Wolf, the proprietor, came walking around the corner, squinting at the script window he had pulled up in his hand. He scratched the stubble on his chin and said, "Welcome, adventurer, to the world of Reborn Isles 5. I am so happy to..." Hold on a moment. The customer's face looked like he had bathed in nuclear waste and got cancer instead of magical powers. His cheekbones were nearly higher than his eyes, his brow was wider than his ears, and his nose more bulbous than a troll's. The tattoos and scars were all over the place as well, about one step better than clown makeup. In short, he looked like he had hit random on the face generator. "I need bombs. Let's go. Come on. I got your money right here," he said, slamming some silver knights onto the counter. Come on, come on, come on. I'm in a rush. Come on." Wolf snarled and jabbed a finger at his customer. "You're Abby, aren't you? Back here again, eh? Sell me your bombs, money man." Wolf's face went almost as red as Abby's complexion. "A bomb this time? What could you possibly need a bomb for? Give me the iron ore or get out." Bobby reached into his pack and dumped 10 chunks of iron ore out on the counter next to the money. 5 copper pawns each retail for the player, 6 to the system. Altogether, 1 silver of profit, and the only expense to Wolf was documenting the experience points, EXP, distributed for the tutorial quest. System subsidized, of course. The Curse of the Star Wraiths of the Steel and Stormbright series was written by the Lord Otter, copyright 2023. Cover art by Neutron Boar. Chapter 1. Origin. Darkness came in full as the storm clouds rolled overhead. The landscape reeled with its plains of golden grass, acacia trees, and cool rhododendrons dimming as if under a spell. All the magic and hope of that land vanished with it. In its place there came a feeling of ominous uncertainty, coupled with the odd streak of lightning. The brothers frowned as they rode atop their mares. Their cowls spanned over their heads while rain soaked them to the bone. Normally, Zolan and Serathis wouldn't have been surprised by weather like this. Yet it dawned on them that this was no ordinary storm. It arrived in a matter of minutes, and what started as a mild drizzle had become a downpour. "It looks like we've chosen a bad time to visit Mother's grave," said Zolan, his voice barely recognizable over the howling winds. "Well, it's too late to change that now," his brother replied. "This storm is getting worse by the minute. We should find some cover." "Perhaps you're right." He looked about them, spotting a lone acacia tree standing nearby. Its branches swayed violently with the wind, yet it looked safer than the path they were riding along. Lightning struck overhead. Zolan's horse whinnied in response. The youth tried calming the beast, as he could feel her panicked movements coming from underneath him. He kept her calm enough so that she followed his brother. They departed from the path, and soon they were both underneath the boughs of the large acacia. The wind howled in their ears, though it seemed that the storm was steadily abating in intensity. Serathis had dismounted when there came another flash of lightning, this time causing the tree over them to erupt in a plume of flames. The 2 horses reeled in panic as they sped off in opposite directions. Serathis cried out in shock, seeing that his brother was carried away by his mare. It was only a moment before they were separated, the downpour drowning out their shouts for one another. Echoes Through Distant Glass of the Beyond Cascadia series is written by Kirk Pierzchala. Copyright 2020. Cover design produced by Heronsgate Press. Prologue. "He's late," she told herself. "Or did I mistake the time? Maybe something happened to him. Someone found out and got to him, and now they're on their way here to find me." On the horizon, the late summer evening died slowly, swallowed by the gathering maelstrom. Behind the controls of her parked vehicle, the silvery-haired older woman watched anxiously as from heavy clouds of bruised lavender, snakes' tongues of lightning flicked downwards towards the midwestern plains. The flat green expanse before her looked weirdly unfamiliar in the livid light of the advancing storm. With quick, nervous movements, the woman checked her mirrors and the rear-view data screen on the vehicle control panel. Still no movement anywhere near her in the nearly deserted parking structure. "But of course he's not late," she thought. "I'm early." Distractedly regarding her own reflection, she tucked her short hair behind her ears and noted with displeasure how tired she appeared. How old. How hunted. "Vacation starts tomorrow," she reminded herself. Perfect time to be out of the country before any possible unpleasantness develops. She hadn't seen her cousin in Montreal for almost 7 years and was looking forward to the visit. Uncontrolled, her thoughts then skittered back over the efforts she'd made to leave the facility without attracting notice. She was pretty sure she was not detected or followed. But I've never had to do anything like this before. I might have missed something. I might have left all sorts of evidence behind without realizing it. She still had not fully come to terms with the reality of her predicament. On one level it felt like a game with frighteningly high stakes, the rules of which were hidden from one as inexperienced as herself. Startled, she jumped when the echo of a slamming car door reverberated through the structure. The sharpness of the noise struck her nerves painfully, like scalding water on a hangnail. Heart pounding, she read the scanner on the dash screen and saw a figure in a hooded jacket walking towards her vehicle. Aes Sedai of the Angel War book series was written by Daniel P. Riley. Copyright 2022. Cover art by Restart. Chapter 1. A killer walked these streets. The brilliant neon cacophony of lights was blinding, an array of colors strewn across the landscape. LED displays and screens had replaced street signs and shop placards years ago. The crowded streets of Shibuya and what is known as Harajuku have been the height of esoteric fashion for decades, until the mega-conglomerates reduced the beautiful and strange fashion center of Tokyo into a series of streets known for exotic iniquity and perversion. These cramped streets now displayed acts of depravity upon myriad advertisement screens, young men and women engaged in carnal acts dressed like children or popular characters from modern and ancient entertainment. Each building housed troubled people within its walls, enslaved by avarice. Those who succumbed fully to their wants huddled amidst the trash in the streets, high on designer drugs and cortex stimulations provided by virtual reality connectors, or VRCs, covering their eyes and ears. The virtual world of NG3, or New Game 3, the current platform peddled by New Active Corp., provided an unhealthy respite from the rigors of life. From one of the many dens stumbled 3 men, their suits wrinkled and their ties loosely hanging from their collars. They sang bawdy songs, arms around each other's necks as they fumbled down the street. Each man is unique in life, if not dress. Makai Shoda, senior accountant of Gumao Corp., Otori Hiro, senior editor of marketing for Gumao Corp., and Suzuru Tondo, vice president of marketing for Gumao Corp. Only the last of these men was marked for death by Suzakushin Corp., which did not care if the other 2 survived the night. An Axe to Eat the Gods, Barbarians of the Storm Book 4, written by Rob Rhymes, copyright 2024. Cover art produced by Rob Rhymes. Prologue. Bastards. Fenric grunts quietly to himself as he remains hidden in the jungle brush on the edge of the ancient stone city of Bandu. He was prepared to find nothing but death when he passed through, as he was already told about the slaughter of the Kongans, the intelligent guerrilla warriors of the city. However, he did not expect their home to be overrun by a horde of goblins. What he finds even more detestable is that the goblins who have moved in are cooking and eating his friends. In a matter of days, maybe even less, these goblins have desecrated a once great city. The anger within Fenric begins to boil over as he explodes out of the Kasara jungle and across the large grassy field outlined in massive temples of gray stone. The closest group of goblins drop their Kongan meat and draw their swords, daggers, and bows as the bearded, buff barbarian roars forward, his sword overhead, a red gemstone in its crossguard burning with the fury of its wielder. Fenric comes down with a guttural yell, cleaving a goblin through the skull. The 4 other goblins in the group quickly recoil. However, Fenric with a backslash takes the head of one faster than it could have blocked. He spins through, gutting a 3rd goblin while breaking its bow in half. The 2 remaining goblins try to pounce on their attacker simultaneously. However, one is met with a sword to the throat. The last takes a dagger to the face. Both goblins slide off of the sharp weapons that killed them, their black blood pooling out around them between blades of vibrant green grass. Weird of the Skull Totem, Book 2, Scarred, The Wandering Sword, was written by Eric Wagg, copyright 2024. Cover art by Krzysztof Porchowski Jr. Prologue. A scream followed by a thunderous crash broke the orderly sounds of the morning work outside. 3 women glanced horrified at each other. Shouts of panic and muffled calls to arms sent shivers of fear down their spines. Each kept a stern expression. 2 years spent beyond the borders of safety and civilization tempered even a timid soul, and none of them had ever been timid. From the arrow loops of the room they occupied, they could not have seen what was going on outside. Their imaginations conjured up red-hued fears. Dread had stalked the shadowed corners of their minds for so long, and they wondered only when the black hand of fate would reach out from the benighted lands about them. They, of course, would fight. A tall blonde woman with resolute blue eyes stood and signaled for the other 2 to follow her. She sped up the dim stone stairs in powerful cat-like leaps 3 treads at a time to the tower roof. A dark-haired woman reached the crenels first, and her face twisted in cold horror. The tall woman cocked her ear at the terrible commotion before she saw the scene her shorter companion gaped at. "What is it?" she said as she pulled herself out of the trap-door. A sharp edge scraped in her usually steady voice. The third woman, alluring and dark-eyed with sleek black hair, all but flew with practiced ease from the hatch behind her, and they met the first in wide-eyed silence at the edge of the tower. The tall woman gasped, then quickly regained her composure. She took in the scene before her with a baronial gaze. The cause of the tremendous crash they had heard a moment ago was revealed. The drawbridge gate which secured the front of the castle was down and bridged the stony, steep-banked, roaring river that separated the castle gate from the crude road beyond. Dust and debris from its recent fall was still settling about the gaping entrance. Beyond, rolling tendrils of thick morning fog grappled the earth like the arms of some cyclopean sea creature. It could not conceal the hundreds of loping forms racing towards the now vulnerable opening. Misplaced Faith, an apocalypse cowboy adventure, was written by W.S. Wentworth, copyright 2023. Cover art by Ryan Williamson. Chapter 1. 4 figures emerged from the shadows of the alley and into the street. Their faces were concealed by masks. They wore shabby, ragged clothing. This group was the definition of a group whose path you wouldn't want to cross in a dark alley. I could see the icy grip of night squeeze them, their breath forming wisps of steam in the air. We live in a world where electricity has become a distant memory. The soft glow pouring from an unboarded slice of the street-facing window held an air of extravagance, a glimpse of the life that once was. The warm light, likely from a crackling fire, hinted at comfort in a time of desolation. I watched from a distance as they approached the nondescript door, their movements slow, calculated, and above all, cautious. 2 on each side, they positioned themselves with practiced precision. I strained to hear their hushed whispers. "All right, we don't know how many are in there, but we know they got fire, and that's more'n we got. Maybe they got food, too. As soon as we get in the door, we shoot first, and then we raid," one of them murmured, barely audible from my vantage point. Abruptly, the night was shattered by the thunder cracks of gunshots, their sound tearing through the tranquility like shattering glass. The alley seemed to hold its breath, the echoes of gunfire reverberating before fading into silence. As the echoes waned, the 4 figures lay motionless on the ground after leaving crimson streaks on the alley walls. And there I stood, stepping out from behind them. Dirty pants, a battered green jacket, and a worn-out cowboy hat framing my face, concealed by a gas mask. My name is Samuel. Most folks just call me Cowboy because of the hat. The title suits me fine. Keeps questions at bay.